Interview with Mike Potts coming up today on the Wincinnati Podcast. Yes.
Hello, world. We got a special show as always. TJ Houshmanzada, Jimmy Chase, Coach Jimmy Burrow.
How do you balance being a professional athlete and family obligation? Need your top 5 Bengals of all time.
All time, man. Yeah. Shock the world.
Welcome to the Wincinnati Podcast. I am your host, Ace Boogie. He is your host, Zim Hude. Zim, what's going on, bro?
Hello, world. How y'all feeling right now? I'm feeling really good. We keep on telling y'all about following us on Twitter. If you have not done so, please do so. Me and Ace were talking about this off air. I don't care what anybody tells y'all right now. If they think that they know sports and they think that they could cut it out here in this sports world and talk this sports stuff, tell them to come to the Twitter spaces where it's a complete battlefield. Your favorite podcaster or whatever might not last in there. I'm just letting you know right now. I just came out of one right now. The Steelers boys was talking crazy, so you know what time it is with me. How are you feeling today, Ace?
I'm good, bro. Like you said, we were in the spaces all day today. It was crazy out there today in those streets. You got to definitely be able to come and you definitely got to be able to spin stuff off the top of your dome and be able to have good arguments because it's definitely real over there. But I'm doing good, and we're so excited to have you guys tonight. We have another great show. Bengals scouting director Mike Potts is going to check in with Wincy Nation, so we have that coming up. But before we get into that, please be sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and share this with other Bengals fans. We truly appreciate that. That helps them find the show. That gives us the support that we need, and that helps build the brand. But plus, we'll be talking about the Bengals working out, their unique blend of behind the scenes and stuff of how that went down. We'll be talking about Jonah Williams. And we'll see how the whole offensive line is set to make amends for the postseason. And the Bengals are the reigning AFC champs, but DJ Reader is tired of the disrespect. And we're going to talk about why the AFC runs through Paul Brown Stadium. All right, Zim. So we're going to talk about Mike Potts a little bit later. But Jonah Williams came out and he spoke to the media. And at the presser, he says that he doesn't think that we did enough to step up when we needed to, talking about the offensive line. What are your thoughts on Jonah discussing the offensive line struggles for the Bengals?
I thought it was good that he got out in front of it. It's almost kind of like some but I like the fact that he didn't hide from it. You went straight to it. Let me ask you, I want you to answer the same question, but let me ask you this. I know that they picked up their 5th-year option. Do you consider this a make or break year for Jonah Williams?
It could be, just because when you talk about the tackle market, that's a lot of money that you have to commit to it. So obviously the $13 million, I think he's earned. We have to see if he can string together another healthy season. But I think Jonah Williams has been a solid player. I think that he's really been a guy that's really lived up to the billing. And you don't even hear people talk about the short arms anymore. Remember when that was a thing? But with Jonah Williams, I think that he's been one of the best tackles from his class. And I think if he plays the right way, I think that the Bengals are going to set him up with another extension for next season. So I think that it is possibly, especially with everything looming, you talk about the Joe Burrow deal, the T. Higgins deal. Could he be a potential casualty of that? Of course, you have to consider that. But I think that the Bengals have always, and we talked about this in spaces, not only have they always paid their wide receivers, they've always really paid their left tackles to try to keep them. So I think that Jonah Williams, if he ends up holding up his end of the bargain this season, I think he's a no-brainer for them to bring back.
I agree. I agree. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it because we hadn't talked about Jonah that much. I thought the comments to me were more like they're not hiding from the 50-something sacks, 70-something total. I was looking at a stat earlier today, and it had the Bengals. It was showing Joe Burrow versus Lamar Jackson. I think people would be pleasantly surprised to know that he was sacked the same amount of times as Joe Burrow in more games. The same amount of games. He's 1-3 in the playoffs, and Joe Burrow's 3-1. They were both sacked 19 times. So that's something if you just want to throw out there to a Ravens fan that wants to be heavily critical on our offensive line.
Facts, definitely. But there was another quote from today with DJ Reader. He says, "It seems like the AFC goes through us now. So until somebody comes and takes it from us, I'm going to be confident in us." I have to agree with him. It's kind of crazy and it's kind of silly for people to just be saying that the Bengals are really going to be on a downswing or they're going to have a Super Bowl hangover. Like, I just don't understand it when the Bengals have done nothing but improve. Their biggest weakness, the offensive line, which we just touched on. They've added in more players. They've added in more depth. They've upgraded at different positions. Why are people really acting like the AFC doesn't run through the Bengals, though?
I think it's somebody made a really good point to me, and I think a lot of people told us this before we had got to play the Rams, right? They kept on saying, well, you guys aren't battle tested and you haven't done it yet. And I kept on pushing back and saying, well, some things, it just happens fast and quick like that. I think one thing that's going to change is the Bengals being in people's faces 5 times in prime time this year. Now that everybody's watching, and so now we're not telling them about, like, man, did you see him in the 49ers game? Did you see him take Aaron Rodgers to overtime? All these different things. Or they can see how we lost to the Jets or something like that. To see it in prime time, I think, is a big part of it. But those are the same things that we're asking people now. I want to ask you right now, what do you feel like is the biggest hole, or do you feel like there are any holes that would make someone feel like that right now?
I'm not trying to speak with a bias or anything. Like, obviously, if they had some kind of injury, I think at the corner position or maybe even the edge rusher position, if it's someone like a Trey Hendrickson, maybe you worry a little bit. But no, I just don't really see the holes on this team like that. You know, maybe receiver, that's argumentative, tight end possibly, but I don't think that they're done yet. I don't think that the roster is completely set. And I honestly feel like if you line them up against any depth chart in the league, I don't see anybody with the depth that this team has as it currently stands. And I think that they're just going to add to it.
And notice you said wide receiver could be a point of like a hole, right? Bengals have the best wide receiver core in the National Football League. So that's why I know these aren't household names, but, you know, there are a lot of players out there. They might not go to Pro Bowls, but I feel like they're really stacked. If you ask me the holes on the team, I'm not the biggest fan of Jackson Carman, but I like him at left guard more than 75% of the NFL. Most metrics out there have Bengals ranked at either between the 8th or 10th rated offensive line currently right now on paper. And that's, to me, the weakest part of the team, right?
Right. So, yeah, I agree with you, Zim. I don't think that there's really many holes. We'll have to see what happens with Carman at left guard. But without further ado, you guys are here for the interview. We spoke with Bengals Director of College Scouting, Mike Potts. So we're going to go ahead and bring that in. Welcome to the Wincinnati Bengals podcast. We are happy to be joined by our special guest, Director of College Scouting, Mike Potts. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ace and Zim. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yes, sir. So the first thing that I want to ask you about with the draft process, obviously analytics just plays a big role for the NFL in general. They have a lot of events around that. How does analytics or next-gen stats or anything like that play a factor into the Bengals draft process?
Yeah, we have Sam Francis heads up our analytics. We have a smaller department on that side of things, but it definitely plays a strong hand in our scouting process. We kind of use it as a form of checks and balances to cross-check that with what we see in our evaluation, studying guys on tape, and then also what do the numbers say in different statistical categories. Obviously, everybody looks at the testing numbers, the 40-yard dash time, everything like that. But, it also helps us with play time. We can click on, things in our system where it'll just show us, every snap that this guy played and he was rushing as the right defensive end, or that's just one example. We can look at linebackers, different alignments that they played, receivers, just look at their snaps from the slot, whatever the case is. So it's really helpful, and Sam does a great job with that. So it's something that helps us a lot in our scouting process. And as we're, evaluating the guys on tape, just another tool that we use to cross-check with our grades just based solely off of the film, which is the bulk of what our scouts do.
Great. I feel like you just came in, you hit on a couple points on some things that I think I'm going to bring out, I guess, in the rest of the interview. But you talked about like guys playing at edge snaps and different things like that. One of the things I think caught me off guard, and maybe a lot of Bengals fans, is Zach Carter at the 3rd round pick. And one of the things that I hear people talk about is that early on, we're kind of uncertain on what's the role, or do you feel as though that he'll have opportunities at the edge position, or is he solely an interior defender?
I think some of those questions remain to be seen. We think he can do both. We think he can certainly give you some pass rush and set the edge from an outside alignment playing defensive end. But I think the thing that attracted us most to him was the interior pass rush that he can give us. He did play, as you mentioned, we can, I can just click and say, hey, I want to see all of the snaps that Zach Carter played against Alabama at the 3 technique alignment, just using that as an example. And we thought that, just projecting him for us, we thought that was, the thing that we liked the most about him. But we do think he can play outside. I think it's just a matter of where we want his weight, our coaches getting their hands on him and seeing, hey, what specifically on rundowns, what's his role going to be for us? Is he going to primarily need to play defensive end, or maybe we bulk him up a little bit? I had mentioned he was 282 at the combine, and we think he can be heavier than that. It's just a matter of getting him in here, our coaches getting their hands on him. We like his skill set from both spots. I think maybe if you were asking me personally, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I just think that interior spot is maybe where his most upside may lie. It's just a matter of where he ends up being long term, and maybe he plays multiple spots as a rookie and then settles into more of one spot in years 2, 3, 4 down the line. So we do think he has some versatility, and we're glad that we got him there at the bottom of the 3rd round, and we think he can help us.
Definitely, for sure. So you've kind of talked on other shows about the Bengals grade, and you kind of talked about previously with some of your responses about the emphasis on film. What's more important, do you think, to your scouting department? Is it the film, or is it the measurables, or intangibles, 40 times and stuff like that?
It's definitely the film first and foremost. That's certainly number one, and what we're going to use, and that's what our scouts base their grades off of. But you also are going to incorporate those numbers for sure. If there's a guy that, let's say we have a 7th round grade on, or a priority free agent grade on, and he tested at the top of the charts for his position, 40 time jumps, shuttles, bench press, all of those metrics that we use, then it's just another tool for us to go back and say, hey, let's make sure we're accurate with our grades on this guy. Let's give him another look. Maybe there's, whatever the case is, there's different circumstances where, maybe it was scheme, or maybe it was an injury to where a guy wasn't as effective when, Scout X graded the guy maybe 5 weeks into the season, and he watched his first 5 games of the year, and maybe he was dinged up playing through a hamstring injury. And then, another scout that came through and watched him late in the year, and he was playing a lot better. So that's just an example. But to answer your question, it's always the tape. If it's a tiebreaker between multiple pieces of the evaluation, it's always the tape and what he can do as a football player. But I mentioned Sam Francis. He does a great job with those numbers, and we put a score together for the guy's height, weight, speed. We relate that with players that are playing in the NFL and having success. And, whatever it may be, the Pro Bowl players at wide receiver, this height, weight, speed, jump, shuttles, 40 time, everything like that. This is what the top 10 guys at each position are doing. And then that helps us correlate, our grades and exactly what to look for in those testing measurables. And then, we kind of go from there. But it would be hard to say anything overtakes our evaluations of them as football players on tape, because there's a lot of guys that can run fast and jump high that aren't necessarily good football players.
Do you feel like this year had like more of a challenge as far as like the amount of the pool itself, because dealing with the players that opted out, then them coming back, and then you now having this great big pool of players? Was it more difficult for that? And then also, like, how did that tie into drafting at the back end of every single round?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was really challenging for us to first of all, just figure out who was going to be in this draft class. They had to choose to opt out by a certain date. I believe it was in January. And then there's still a little bit of gray area there in terms of whether they wanted to opt out of the draft or still be in the draft. Some guys had signed with agents, which is supposed to keep you out of the draft, but then there's also some exceptions at times. Guys can apply for waivers or appeal the process to, retain their college eligibility. So that part of it was tough. We did think it was a lot deeper in the later rounds this year because a lot of those guys last year chose to come back for another year. So it was tough. There was probably a little bit more guys on our draft board in general than there would have been in a normal year. So that probably helped us a little bit. But then at the same time, we thought the top 3 rounds were a little bit thinner maybe than some years. I'm not saying it was an all-time bad draft class or anything like that, but there was definitely for sure certain positions that were a lot thinner than your average year. So it kind of balanced itself out that way. There was a lot of numbers maybe in that 5th through 7th round range, and maybe some specific spots were a little thinner on the on the days 1 and 2 of the draft. So it did balance itself out that way, but we had to be patient there, picking at the bottom of each round and just see how it played out. And sometimes we stayed patient and let the board talk to us in terms of the number of players that were there. And then obviously we traded up twice when we thought the board wasn't falling in our favor and we didn't want to go down to a different level of players. So that's why we made those 2 moves that we did.
Was some of the thought process maybe like, this is maybe a wide receiver that we had like a 5th, 6th, 7th round draft grade on, but then some of those guys maybe went undrafted and then you were able to like reach out to those guys after the draft? Did that happen? Or I'm just naming wide receiver, but did that happen like for a couple instances where you're like, well, I think this guy is really good in this spot, and then maybe they fell out of the draft?
Yeah, for sure. And wide receiver is a good example because there's a ton of guys that get drafted first of all, and there's just a lot of numbers at the wide receiver position in general. But to answer your question, there's a ton of players at every position that we have draftable grades on. It's different every year, the exact amount of guys that we have draftable grades on, but there's a ton of guys that we do have those 5th, 6th, 7th round grades on, like you mentioned, that end up going undrafted. And we have agreed to terms with a number of college free agents, and we did have draftable grades on a lot of those guys. Obviously, unfortunately, we can't speak about those publicly until the contracts are official, but there are some guys that we really liked and we would have considered in those later rounds. Had we maybe not traded one of those 7th round picks, maybe at least a handful of the guys that we agreed to terms with would have at least been in the discussion there. So we're excited about that class as well. It'll just be probably another week or so before we can discuss those, and they'll be put out there officially in the next week.
So sticking with the wide receivers and primarily in the 1st round, it was a crazy draft, right? Like we're seeing wide receivers go left and right. I can't imagine how you guys were what the move was, I guess, in the draft room. I'm probably excited because we already have 3 good ones, but there were trades and stuff going on. Can you describe what that was like for you guys just in the war room, like seeing all that go on? Because everyone on our side, that's just like the viewer of everything was like, this is insane. Guys are getting traded. All of these receivers are going. What was the mood like in the draft room for you guys when that was happening?
Yeah, it was crazy. We saw the trades, we saw the free agent movement and everything like that, and the big contracts at the wide receiver position, and then it correlated to the draft as well. There's those guys are winning games and they're getting paid commensurate with their value. So I think there's probably a lot of teams that wanted to get those guys that they think can be dynamic weapons and probably get them on a rookie contract, which is obviously more affordable than the contracts that some of these big name receivers are getting. So I do think it'll be interesting to monitor going forward. I think the receiver position is probably at an all-time high right now in terms of just value across the league. But we do have 3 guys that we absolutely love. We've got some other guys, some other depth guys, to fill out the rest of our wide receiver room that we really like as well. And we have agreed to terms with some undrafted guys, and we'll continue to monitor that market, in terms of free agency or trades, whatever the case may be, at receiver, because, I don't think you can ever have enough of those dynamic weapons on offense, especially with the quarterback and the O-line pieces that we put together, tight end and running back as well. So we want to be a dynamic offense, and we're always going to be looking to add those playmakers and the guys that can ultimately put points on the board.
Mike, you can tell me straight up. Were you guys thinking like I've seen you on another pod talk about like being the backside of this, on picking in each round? There was a couple instances where you're about 5-6 picks away, right, from a guy that you potentially want to draft. Was tight end a position that you guys were looking at early in the draft?
Yeah, we certainly looked at every position. We probably weren't going to take a quarterback in the top couple rounds,
Right.
But other than that, we were heavily invested. Not that we didn't do our research on the quarterbacks as well, but we were heavily in the market of all of those positions. I said it. I don't think we went into the draft expecting to take 5 out of 6 picks on defense. That's just kind of the way that our board spoke to us, and that's the way it played out. So tight end for sure was a spot we researched heavily and we evaluated all those guys. We did private workouts with a lot of them. We were at a lot of their pro days. It just didn't break that way on the board. But not just tight end, really. Like I said,
right.
every position we were heavily invested in evaluating those guys properly, and we had some good grades on a lot of guys. Like I said, we did get picked over in a number of rounds that there were some guys that we liked at a lot of positions that went 5, 10, 15 spots before we were selecting in those rounds. But yeah, we certainly weren't honed in specifically on the positions that we ended up ultimately drafting. That's just the way it played out, and I'm happy with the way it played out. But there's always a lot of players that you really like across the draft at a number of positions that you kind of cringe when they go to other teams because you were kind of hoping that they would end up in Bengals stripes. But obviously we only ended up with 6 of them, and there's 250, 60 some draft picks, so you can't end up with every player that you like.
Facts. So obviously you guys ended up with Dax Hill, a player that we both really like, in round 1. There was a lot of speculation before the draft that the Bengals would consider trading down. Was that a possibility? And was it when you saw Dax Hill there at 31, you were just like, yeah, let's just turn this card in?
Yeah, we definitely consider trading up and back really in every round. Sometimes it's us being the aggressor in terms of us making the calls, and sometimes we're patient. Again, it goes to what the board says. If there's a number of guys there that you like, you think you can be a little bit more patient, and you wait for the phone to ring, whether it's moving up or moving back. If it's something that makes sense for both sides, then you go ahead and pursue it. But in the first round, we were happy with the players that we had available to us, and Dax was the highest guy on our board. So we were happy with the way it played out, and we were happy to make him a Bengal.
I feel like right before you all picked, the day of, we kept on hearing a lot about George Karloff. Is that a guy that you guys looked at a lot prior to the draft? Not taking anything away from Dax Hill, but it felt like that morning and all leading up to it, and then to see that guy like just fall all the way down to 30 and get taken right before you. Is that a guy that you guys had on your radar?
Yeah, he was absolutely on our radar. He was a guy that we liked a lot. But the same could be said about Dax Hill. I think both of those guys, we do all these projections. We go through our own mock draft. We go through different scenarios, league value, public value, just kind of the buzz that we're hearing from other teams and things like that. And we kind of thought in most of the projections that we did that both Dax Hill and Karloff, there was a good chance that they would both be gone at 31. But they were both guys we liked as well as a number of other guys, like I said. So if it was just one guy left that we liked, we probably would have been more heavily looking into trading up. But when you're there and you're a handful of picks away, and there's a handful of players that you still like and you have a high regard for, there's not as much urgency to move up, and we're happy with the way it played out.
Definitely. So you talked about medical being something that was obviously a factor in the grade. Do you feel like there were any players in this draft that you just took completely off of your board just because of the medical?
Yeah, there's players every year that you avoid altogether. We'll leave them on our board. We don't necessarily remove them completely from the board, but we have on the board, we have their character and their medical grade. So for one of those two reasons, that will just notate that, hey, we're going to avoid this player overall, but we'll still leave them. Let's say the guy's a 3rd round talent. We'll still leave him there in the 3rd round column on our board. But whether it's a character grade or medical grade, signifying that we just wouldn't touch this player for whatever the reason may be. Some guys have both medical and character issues that would eliminate them from us taking them. So that just kind of notates it for us. But yeah, there's a number of guys medically every year for sure that, our doctors grade and they do a great job with it. And, they grade them A through F. And if a guy's, down in that D minus F range, they always tell us if you can try to find one that, is going to be a little bit better bet medically. So there is guys every year, and it's unfortunate because there are players sometimes where you like the player and you like their tape, but unfortunately it's just too big of a risk medically. So that's just part of it.
All right, like, I don't know what the mood was. I don't know, if you guys are as hungry in the war room as, coming straight off of a Super Bowl. You're like, man, I got Joe Burrow. Like, was there talk to me about the energy. Like, was it a lot of high fives like later on, where was it like celebratory type of things, or was it more chill, like we got this?
I think we're all confident. I think we all have a lot of belief in what we're doing. I think seeing the results on the field has helped in that regard. So, but by no means are we satisfied. We want to be picking one spot later next year. So, that really, if anything, made us more hungry to get back there, just getting a taste of it and not coming out on the winning end of the biggest game of the year. I think it was a combination of seeing those results, having confidence in what we're doing, but staying hungry at the same time. So it was not, a nervous demeanor or an overly cocky or overly confident demeanor in the draft room. But, I think everybody is feeling good about the way we're doing things and our process. And we're constantly looking to improve it. We want to keep getting better every year. We don't want to just stay complacent and say, oh, this is how we did it last year. We got to the Super Bowl, so let's not look for ways to improve. We're always looking for ways. You mentioned the analytics stuff. That's a piece of it. We're just always looking to constantly evolve and make our process more efficient, more effective.
Let me say this. Maybe I phrased it different. Isn't it like a different feeling, like maybe like for certain players, like say a T. Higgins or somebody like that has no business being there right at that spot, and it's almost like, is there like a different type of emotion when you see like a guy like that? In my opinion, I guess I'm just giving an example, but like you see a guy like that, and everybody's like, can't believe we did that. Like, was it a little bit of that this year versus years past? And if it was a pick before, what was that pick where you just like everybody just went crazy?
I think it really it's hard to say because we were excited probably with all of our picks this year. It was just a matter of the two times we had to trade up, we had to give up something to go up and get it. In the first round, we were extremely happy that Dax Hill was there. So everybody's professional. Nobody's losing their minds or anything like that. It's the board's in front of us, and it's probably a little bit less stressful than maybe it would seem not being in the draft room, because the players are ranked right there in front of us, and really we just let it fall how it falls. But then in the second round, we got picked over a little bit more, and then we went up and got the guy that we targeted and that we wanted, and that was at the top of our board. So we were just as excited with that one as we were with the way it fell in the first round. We just didn't necessarily have to trade up to go get the guy that we thought was a real high caliber. But I think when we put the work in and we trust our process of the way we do things, I don't think there was any pick where we were like, that was okay, but I wish it would have felt a little bit differently. I think we had to give up 2 picks, unfortunately, to go up and get guys that we targeted, but we were excited with all 6 of the guys that we ended up taking.
You talked about Taylor Britt, which was obviously the guy that you guys traded up in the second round to get. What was it for you guys that just made it be a pick that you just had to have this guy, especially for the Cincinnati Bengals? I
think his speed, his length, his physicality. I think when you guys watch him on tape, you can see that jump off the screen. Just his competitiveness, his passion for football. I don't know if you guys have got a chance to talk to him yet, but he just exudes confidence and passion for the game.
You can connect us now.
What's that?
We haven't talked to him yet. You can introduce us now.
You need to get him on the podcast, I guess.
For sure. Well, I'm sorry. Keep going. I just had to.
Maybe we can get that set up here sometime in the future. But he's a guy. I think it just jumps off the screen the way he plays the game, and that's what we're looking for. In terms of guys that love football. I'm sure you've heard it a lot, just in the type of guys that we want to add to our locker room. And like I said, he kind of signifies exactly what we're looking for. And on top of that, corner was a position that we definitely wanted to address. We think he can be a starting corner in the league, whether it's as a rookie or sometime in the future. But, we have guys that we won with at corner last year, but we really had barely any depth behind that, going into this year. So we had to address corner one way or another. And he's just a guy that we had high regard for, in terms of his football character and what he brings to the table, just in terms of talent as a player and what he'll bring to the locker room. So that's some of the reasons that we targeted him. And then when your board gets picked over and he's still sitting there, we didn't think it was worth the risk of waiting another few picks and, potentially somebody either trading up or one of the teams that were there going ahead and drafting him. And then we thought we would have had to go down a level of player from there.
To me, in my opinion, I'm no specialist or anything. I feel like that was my favorite pick of the draft. I think it was the best pick. And what is very telling, I don't think another cornerback was drafted for like another 30-something picks or so. Or I could be wrong on that. But I think it was a while.
That may be right. I'd have to look. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but we did think there was. Don't get me wrong. There was other corners that we definitely liked in the draft. We just thought it was a little bit of a drop off, and not just corners specifically. We thought overall we stack all the players. At that point, we had them 1 to 63 on the board because we're set to pick at 63, and we just thought it was a different level of player. And when it hits you at a position of need as well that you want to address. Both of those things aligned to where we just thought it was worth giving up that pick and going up and getting the guy. So we're happy that Cam Taylor Britt's a Bengal and look forward to seeing him out there at practice this Friday and then on into OTAs and training camp.
I think the league agreed with you on that for the most part. I think that's got to be reassuring too after the fact. I'm telling you, there were tiers, I think, to the corners, and I think most of the league feels like you got the last really good number 2 plug and play type of guy or something like that. And I do agree with you. There were many other good corners as well, but he was really special.
Yeah, absolutely. We're glad it worked out that way. And you'll never know if we didn't give up the 6th round pick and we sat there, you'll never know if he would have been there or not. We go through all these scenarios and we just thought that was the best decision at the time. And that's what we're not gonna live with any regrets on it. That's a decision we made and we went up and got the guy that we targeted. So we're not going to look back and regret it later on.
For sure. Another process is just for us as fans, viewers, analysts, looking at the draft, you not only pay attention to your team, but obviously the teams in your division and what they ended up doing. What are just your thoughts on some of the teams around the division and the drafts that they had?
Yeah, it was a lot different when you look team to team because Cleveland didn't have a lot of early picks with some of the picks that they traded away, and then Baltimore had a ton of picks. I think they end up with 6 4th-round picks, so they added a lot of talent. But Cleveland added some nice talent later in the draft as well, and then you've got Pittsburgh getting I'm sure what they hope is their future franchise quarterback, and then adding a lot of other players that we had high regard for as well. So I think across the division we've got a ton of respect for all 3 of our teams. Of the teams in our division that we have to go against. I think I may be biased, but I think it's the best division out there and the most physical division. It's a different brand of football, I think, in the AFC North, and all of these teams are trying to gear their rosters to beat the other 3 teams that they have to go against twice a year. So I do think all 3 of those teams did well in the draft, and it'll be interesting to see how this year plays out. We're hoping to defend our AFC North title for sure. That's something that we take a lot of pride in.
Yes, sir. I feel like I only have one more question I wanted to ask you personally. Do you have a favorite pick of all time?
A favorite pick? No, I actually don't. It's funny. It sounds like cliche, but I never have like a favorite pick for me personally because it's like it might be hard to again imagine it. Maybe if you're not in the draft room and you're seeing all the reports that we have on these guys, everybody we draft probably has 5, 6, 7 reports. So even if Scout X was the primary scout that went through that school multiple times and maybe they had a little bit more, of an impact on that. There's just so many different people from, even the medical staff. Obviously, our coaches have a piece in the evaluation as well. So there's a lot of guys that I'm proud of being a part of, adding to this roster. And then, back when I worked for the Falcons prior to the Bengals as well, there's a lot of guys that you're proud of, that even if you were just a very small piece of adding the guy to the roster. But really, it's an honest answer. There's really not one guy that stands out, in terms of like, this was my guy that I went and did,
right,
all the work on, and I deserve the credit for, because that's really never the case for any of these guys. But I think we've had some good success here in the past few years, specifically drafting, and like I said, the results have shown on the field. We just have to keep drafting well. We have to keep doing well in free agency, and the results will speak for themselves on the field, I believe. So we just have to, we can't be complacent and be happy with where we're at. We just got to keep pushing forward and keep looking for ways to improve the roster.
Definitely. Well, Mike, we want to thank you for your time, and us as Bengals fans, we're excited for this new class of rookies. We can't wait to see them this Friday, but want to thank you for coming on the Wincinnati Podcast.
I appreciate you guys having me on. It was fun.
Thank you, sir. All right, Zim. So we just had on Mike Potts. What were your thoughts on some of the things that Potts talked about in the interview, and essentially how it went with him talking through the 2022 draft class?
I feel as though he was a pro. I thought that he answered a lot of different questions where, I was trying to get him to say, hey, would you take Trey McBride? Would you have taken George Karloff? You asked him some really good questions about, like, some guys, like their background. So I just think that what we got from it was a little bit of an inside thing. I feel like it's more of a committee approach, because some of the questions about like the war room and stuff, they were more like a committee type approach. And I think that's a testament to what the Bengals are doing, and how people say that they don't have like the proper scouting and all these different things like that. So I thought it was good to kind of get like a glimpse of how they draft picks. He talked about how the board will be set up, how it's not really stressful. These are the list of guys. So I thought that was really cool. That was dope. Nothing really shocked me from what he said. It was really good to hear, like, like the relaxation and like some of the answers that he was given, because it's just a testament to Joe Burrow. I'm gonna ask you the same question. What were some of your takeaways coming out of it?
Yeah, I think that he answered the question as well. I think that he did give us some insight on George Karloff, so I was surprised that kind of came out there. But I think he just basically gave us like what the situation was from their standpoint. CTB was a guy that they had to have, and obviously they're still talking about potentially adding some more undrafted free agents, which we didn't ask because he wasn't at liberty to say. So that should be, I believe, announced on Thursday or something like that. So I think that he was very candid and to the point that he could be with some of those questions. But yeah, overall, I thought it went good. But we have a word from our sponsor of the podcast, Midwest Best Barbecue. They tell me that the bono wings will make you do the gritty. The bono wings will make you do the gritty. Bono wings, come and get them bono wings. Bono wings, who they gonna be? Them bono wings, them beats got you with them bono wings. Bono wings, they tell me that the bono wings will make you do the gritty. The bono wings will make you do the gritty. Yes, sir. So shout out to Midwest Best Barbecue and Creamery over there in Loveland. If you're listening from home, it's at 669 Justice Court in Loveland, Ohio. We still haven't had anybody send us a challenge of the Uno Wings challenge doing the gritty, singing the song inside. So I guess y'all don't want some free food, but if you do, follow me on Twitter at New Stripe City. Follow Zim on Twitter at ZimHude. And send us that video so you can get you some free Uno Wings. But first and foremost, we do want to wish head coach Zach Taylor a happy birthday. It is his birthday today, so Hude to Zach. And then there was another announcement today, Zim. I think I saw it on the Wincinnati Pod Twitter. It was an announcement of Nike doing a campaign with Uno and T. What were your thoughts on just seeing that? Because that's major.
Hello, world. Like, that we here. You know what I'm saying? These are the things that I thought about, like, in my mind a long time ago. Like, I wish that TB wasn't with Adidas so that all three of the Migos could do it together. But it's just like, man, when we talking about this, I'm really, that's part of the reason why I'm a Bengals fan, is because I fell in love with, like, the game of Ocho Cinco, AJ Green. And long before that, I fell in love with, you know, like the prospect of Chris Henry. Like, it's just so many different things. So to see, like, our guys, like, to be like, you know, like, these are the dudes right now, that's really dope as a Bengals fan. And I think, like, when we talk to the opposition, they can say whatever they want about the Bengals. I don't think anybody's disputing those two for sure. And when they bring up Tyler Boyd, it gets tricky for them then too, because then they start scratching their head like, whoa, multiple 1,000-yard seasons. Like, this is real, and we're a part of it. And I feel like we're living in history. And now it's televised by Nike. You feel me? Like,
Max, welcome to our old friend AJ Green used to call him the swoosh. Welcome to the swoosh. It's definitely going down. But Zim, I'm gonna let you give the surprise reveal of the guests that we will have on this Thursday.
We are going to have none other than Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network. Another big get. Not even going to cap with you. Like, that's another big one. So make sure you tell everybody that you know. I haven't seen him on pods recently. So we're going to ask him some really good stuff. Going to get him to recap. I'm excited about it. Do you have any other thoughts on Daniel Jeremiah? Like, this is big.
Not at all. I just want to thank our producer, Ryan, that handles things behind the scenes. He's really done a lot for the podcast. So definitely want to give him his kudos, but definitely be sure to be here live on Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, hop in the comments and let us know what you guys thought about the interview. And thank you once again for listening to the Wincinnati Podcast.
Wincinnati.
Yes.
Hello, world. We got a special show as always. TJ Wincinnati, Jimmy Chase, Coach Jimmy Burrow.
Time to be a Bengals
How do you
fan.
balance being a professional athlete and family obligation? These are top 5 Bengals of all time.
All time? Yeah. Shock the world.